Let's talk about Harry Potter. Now, to do that, I'm going to need some time. So we're going to do this in 8 videos. The reason for that is that Harry Potter was so big. Harry Potter lasted over 10 years between the books and the films as a multinational, multi-million dollar franchise that is still going on to this day in the form of theme parks, video games, stuff on the internet. But it all started off with the books, which then turned into the movies. So, in order to properly do this, I'm going to have to go by this one book slash accompanying movie at a time. Anyway, so here's Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. So, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone had a lot to do, both as a film and as a book. Because you see, it had to establish everything. We had main characters to establish, we had plot to establish, a world to establish, and at the same time wrap up its own story. Did it do a good job? Well, the book did. Millions of people picked up Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone for years and fell in love with Harry's little world. They fell in love with Harry. So let's get to the meat and bones of it. The plot concerns a little boy named Harry Potter, who, when he's a baby, is dropped off at his aunt and uncle's doorstep for unknown reasons at the time. An old man tells us that that it's best for him to live here because he's going to be famous in their world. And it's best if he doesn't grow up around all of that. Flash forward 11 years later, and we find that he's being abused and living in a closet where it's hinted that he's constantly being beaten and starved. Maybe a little fame wouldn't have hurt him. They establish later on that it's because there's a spell on his uncle and aunt's house who he's living with that'll keep him from being found by bad guys, but that's better. Anyway, so on Harry's 11th birthday, he finds out that he's actually a wizard, and that there's actually a secret world of wizardry and magic just underneath the real world, and that he's been invited to attend a school to learn magic. And all of this is told to him by a large, bearded man who comes to pick him up from his family's house, who wants to take him somewhere that he doesn't know, that he's only heard of just that instant, and he's more than happy to go. But honestly, you can't blame him. Gets to the school, figures out that he is actually the one who, when he was an infant, stopped the big evil villain, he who must not be named, Lord Voldemort. But no one knows how he did it because he was like 1. But this guy also was the one who acts as parents, so kind of a problem. Harry then just attends the school, and a little mystery plot unfolds that there's something hidden at the school that apparently a bad guy wants, and they need to figure out who is after it and why. So let's talk about Harry for a second. Harry is what in writing circles and in film circles is called an everyman, which means he's supposed to be just like anybody else. He's not really all that special or unique. As a character, for that, he's actually written quite well. He reacts to things as an 11-year-old would, as an 11-year-old boy would. He questions things as an 11-year-old boy would. He has interests in things as an 11-year-old boy would. He functions pretty well as an everyman. I like to compare him to Bella Swan from Twilight, who functions more as the cardboard cutout that you'd buy at Hot Topic of Bella Swan. Because we're supposed to project onto both of these characters, and where Bella is so empty that she doesn't act like a real human being, it takes us out of that character. On the other hand, Harry acts just as we would, so it puts us even further into that character. Because of that, Harry is actually quite special as a character just because he's not that special. Even in the school, he's about the same level as everybody else. He's not any more good at magic than anyone else. The only thing he is better at is flying broomsticks, which we'll get to in a second. The other two characters that we have to establish real fast, of course, is Hermione and Ron, or the Exposition Twins. Exposition is the part of the story where they have to sit down and explain it to you. And Hermione and Ron serve that purpose very well. Because if something happens, Ron can say, "Oh, well, I know of that because I grew up in a wizarding family, so da 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 da." And Hermione can say, "Oh, well, I read a book about it," and na 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 na. And so they can explain to Harry, and thus the audience, what is going on. And they work too because we actually get these lovable characters. In the book, Ron is established as just another guy. He's a normal wizard boy. He's not extraordinary in himself. The only thing that he's extraordinary at is he's extraordinarily poor, which they kind of beat into us. And Hermione is just kind of book smart. She's a know-it-all. She's kind of got her head in the air a little bit. She's got her "I'm better and I know more things," but she gets humbled about halfway through the book and film when they meet the troll. Then we have to establish everyone else in the world. So, George Lucas talked about some characters are for plot, and some characters are for world building. Harry Potter has a lot of characters for world building. There's a whole school full of teachers and students that come into play every once in a while in the story, but never really are part of the main piece. And this is where we start to get the problem with the film. In the book, they have the time to explain who these characters are and give them personality. In fact, in the book, we spend a lot of time following Harry, Ron, and Hermione around their year. In the film, we can only get X so much because they had a runtime to look at. The film is almost 3 hours. And if they had gone through every single explanation of every single character and introduced them all to us, we would have been there forever. So they kind of shorthanded us. And we get characters like Seamus Finnegan and the Weasley twins. Just told, okay, well, these are Ron's brothers, and they're kind of kooky. And we get people like Neville Longbottom, who in the book is kind of this goofy dork. And in the book, they establish him really well as being lovable, but kind of a loser. And he ends up in the first book kind of saving the day because they win the House Cup, which they never care about afterwards. Okay, this is the other problem with the books and the movies. They'll introduce a concept that only shows up once and then is never heard from again. The first one has probably the biggest, and that's Professor Quirrell. He's the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, and he ends up, I'm not even going to say spoiler alert, because it's been like 10 years. We know how this guy ends. He ends up being the main bad guy, where they were trying to throw you off by saying that this other guy, Severus Snape, who ends up being not the bad guy, but still kind of a jerk. So Quirrell ends up being the bad guy, and he ends up that he's after this thing called the Sorcerer's Stone, which can bring people back to life, or make them live longer, or whatever they need. And it turns out he's after it because he works for Lord Voldemort, who is actually still around as a ghost, or mist, or something. And he lives on the back of Quirrell's head. Again, they don't say where this came from, ever. And in the book, we get Harry and Quirrell are fighting, and whenever Harry is near Voldemort, his scar, his big famous scar, everyone's seen the lightning bolt with the glasses. Okay, that scar will burn, and while he's fighting with Quirrell and Voldemort to get the Sorcerer's Stone in the end, and Quirrell is in pain because apparently Harry's skin can burn him, Harry passes out and wakes up in the hospital, and Dumbledore tells him, "Oh well, Quirrell has been taken care of; he is no more." In the film, we watch Harry kill him. Turn him to ash. But then after that, all the films, all the books, we never hear about this character again. We never hear about the Philosopher's Stone. We don't hear about, or the Sorcerer's Stone. It's the Philosopher's Stone in England. Sorcerer's Stone here. Don't ask me why. I have no idea. But we don't hear about this character ever again. Kind of a cool character they established. Okay, bye. Okay, the other problem that the films have, besides the not being able to establish all the characters, they can't establish all the subplots. Let me give you an example. In the book, Hagrid, the big, tall, burly guy that takes Harry for the first time, he's actually the groundskeeper at Hogwarts. And it turns out he's not allowed to do magic. They'll explain that later, and I'll get to that when it comes up. But it turns out that Hagrid gets his hands on a dragon egg. And they explain dragon eggs are illegal to have because dragons are so dangerous and they're regulated. And, you know, Ron's brother, it happens to be a dragon trainer. Exposition. So then Harry, Ron, and Hermione spend time hiding the dragon and helping Hagrid take care of it and trying to convince Hagrid to get rid of the stupid thing. And they find out that our other antagonist, Draco Malfoy, who kind of comes in important later, has found out. And he starts lording it over them, so they're trying to get Hagrid to get the thing out. But he knows that if the school knows that if Hagrid has this dragon, he could get in a lot of trouble, he could get arrested. So they establish that this is kind of a big deal. And at one point, they sneak off and they carry this dragon in this giant crate up to the tallest tower, and Ron's brother carts it off. And then they get caught, but because Draco is out of his bed telling on the kids, he also gets in trouble, so they all have to go to the Forbidden Forest. Turns out that there's somebody eating unicorns. It turns out it's the back of Quirrell's head is eating unicorns to defeat Voldemort. And we get a centaur who saves Harry, and it tells us all sorts of interesting things. That's how it works in the book. In the film, Harry, Ron, and Hermione have something to tell Hagrid, and apparently it's against the rules to be out of bed after dark. Alright. So they just go, even though it's against the rules. They're not even sneaking at all. Go tell, and it just so happens that night Hagrid's hatching a dragon, and for no established reason, Draco Malfoy is looking in the window, so he goes and busts everybody, and Hagrid loses his dragon, like that. We get this whole thing, we get a 4-minute scene about this dragon, and it hatching, and it being all cool, and CG dragon, and Hagrid's beard catches fire, and then it's gone. So the film, needless to say, has a lot of problems, and I know a lot of people really liked the film. But I attribute that to Harry Potter craze. What the film does is it gives us a little slideshow of scenes that we liked from the book. And establishes things for people who haven't read the book so they understand what's going on. But it does it in such a way that if you haven't read the book, you can't really enjoy all the little nuances. And while this did draw people in, it could have been so much better to endure. Make it a classic. These days, you ever hear of anybody who wants to plug in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone? I didn't think so. Name the last time you watched it. Honestly, think about it. Probably was a while ago. I can say something about Christopher Columbus, not being that great of a director, and the fact that the kids were all young and didn't have a lot of experience, so the kids' acting is kind of abysmal. And they all get better, though. As soon as we get Columbus off the thing, the films actually pick up a bit, and the kids become better actors, and now Daniel Radcliffe and all of them are really good now. But they had a long way to go. So that's what we've got. That was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Next week, we'll talk about the second film in the franchise, and the second book in the franchise, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Also known as Harry Potter and the Three Jar Jars. Anyway, we'll see you then.